Hello and welcome to episode 273 of the Thursday Night Podcast / post-game show, because the Georgia State-Georgia exhibition basketball game just wrapped, so this is going to be kind of like a hybrid, I guess. I don't know, it's late at night, lots to go on, because if you're just kind of out on the Georgia State football experience right now, the good news is there's a bit of a buffer zone here, because we're going to start by talking about basketball for the first time. I'm joined by David, as always. Thanks for listening. David, thanks for joining me.
Of course. I was updating my calendar the other day. Two sports season just right around the corner.
Hey, we're here, unofficially, we're here. So, if you weren't in the arena, probably don't have much to go off of with this game. Join David in that regard, because obviously David up in Chicago, unable to take in the festivities. I was there. I'll try to make this not just like Brady rants for 5 to 10 minutes on stuff and just kind of like rattles through it. So I'll try and go pretty quickly. I'll throw up the scores. Obviously, the best part about this, aside from, you're playing in front of an audience, which I think helped both teams, is it was like a regular game. You got live stats, so we can cite the stats. It was a 65-61 Georgia win as we just get into the meat of this podcast already. It was a 40-23 game at half in favor of the Bulldogs, so game getting away from the Panthers a good bit, but they fought back. There was a 12-0 run in the middle of the second half, sparked by a personal 8-0 run for Malachi Brown as he kind of took over the game there for a moment. And it played out all the way down the stretch. UGA couldn't buy a free throw in the final minute. Georgia State had a couple of looks. They had a look in the final 10 seconds when it was a 64-61 game. Micah Tucker, freshman in his first college game, has a good look at three that rims out, and so Georgia is able to escape. But you certainly like to see the fight back. Didn't get played out of your own building. I thought it was a really good crowd. Students showed out. The band was going. And I'm sure there was a worry when the game got scheduled that it would end up being kind of an overrun by the folks in black and red. It wasn't. Georgia State had more people in their home arena. In the second half, especially as the comeback started mounting, it was certainly a factor. You felt it in the arena. Mike White, Georgia's coach, talked about it. Lots of positivity from him for Georgia State. Even talking about how they didn't want to just play two inferior teams for these exhibitions. They wanted to test themselves on the road. And then the other one they're playing back at home later this month is they're playing Troy, who is going to be one of the Sun Belt favorites after they made the tournament this past year. So they're getting their little tour of the Sun Belt in before the season starts. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the stats, but I'll rattle through some of the notables here. Jelani Hamilton and Joa Chapel get 17 each. Joa in his Georgia State debut there, both of them really coming on in the second half. Malachi Brown with 12 points, and as I mentioned, 8 of those in a little run by himself. To go along with 6 assists and a team-leading 7 rebounds. Worth mentioning the rebounds as well, because Georgia State was minus 11 on the glass in the first half, and they came back and knotted it up at 42 each to finish the game. Big part of that turnaround is they outscore Georgia by 13 in the second half. And the other notable stat, I guess, to go with is that Georgia was 4 of 29 from 3, which is probably unsustainably bad, and you owe 12 in the second half. You can't bank on that, but it's a team with good guards, and you were able to keep them at bay. Made it a game in the second half, and we've seen Jonas Hayes' teams in the past kind of do this, where the first half's not great, and then they mount a comeback, and maybe they just left themselves too big of a hole. But even grading on that it's an exhibition, you're in the middle of camp and all that, and we've seen it before, this was still against an SEC team, and they showed some real moxie, and this is a team that is basically brand new. Aside from 3 guys who played last year and 1 guy who redshirted, it's a brand new roster, and you saw kind of immediately a lot of the traits that I think Jonas Hayes and his staff wanted to see from the team. So how'd I do? Was that a little under a couple of minutes?
Yeah.
There we go.
I think that was well done. Full disclosure, like you said, I'm just box score scouting this. I think I have to be encouraged, especially when looking through kind of the way that you broke it down on Panther Talk. When it comes to the way that Coach Hayes and Georgia State has been the last couple of years, yes, they start very slow. And typically that's not great. However, when you have a team with this little experience together playing in an exhibition like this and considering the competition, I don't think that that's a bad thing. You know, the last couple of years, there have been some teams where Georgia State has had players that have played together, you know, not necessarily as much as it was 5-10 years ago, but they certainly had some real tangible game minutes together. And, you know, those teams, if they're starting as slow as they had been, that's probably not the best the way you want to run your offense, and especially how you wouldn't want to run your defense. But, you know, I think I am okay with that playing out the way that it did here. And I think it's interesting to me, kind of the names. You know, I don't know if Clash Peters is necessarily going to be I don't think he's expected to be a starter.
I think especially early he might be. You know,
yeah.
Dennis got the third young guy, going to ease him in maybe even if they like his potential. Christian Beam, as soon as he is out there and knows he's 7 feet and can play like he's 7 feet, I think he could be pretty good. You look at the stats, he had 2 points, he was 1 of 5. I don't think he was nearly tough enough down low, playing for his size, where even if you just go up at 7 feet, if you just go straight at the hoop, you could draw a foul, go to the line. But 6 rebounds, he was in the right place a lot of time, but it feels like a guy that your Clash might be counted on earlier in the season, especially because you've got some guys that are going to have to kind of grow into the Division I game. And this was the trial by fire you really could have hoped for, honestly, because the other stat that really stands out if you're looking at the stats, Georgia had 14 blocks. Their size was a big factor in making Georgia State's offense struggle, and those were a good set of players to go up against if you're the Georgia State bigs, a lot of whom are new to the Division I game. Joey Chappelle, I think I said his name wrong earlier, came from JUCO. Beam came from JUCO. Dennis Scott hasn't played college yet. He redshirted last year, so there's some worrying signs in there if you're looking at those numbers, but I think playing them even on the boards is important, and I think if you can see the development happen, which has not always been the case with these Jonas Hayes teams with their bigs, but I think that the raw clay is there, and Beam's an example of that. But in the meantime, as long as he can keep his head, and all pluses as far as that goes tonight for Clash, he might be a low-key, important presence for this team early in the season. And 2 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. Thought he passed the ball pretty well for a big tonight. You got what you're looking for there, I think. 3 turnovers, not great, but this was an aggressive Georgia State defense. It was an aggressive Georgia defense that was making things happen. And look, there were some preseason turnovers both ways, where these teams are in the middle of camp. It is easy to forget that because it felt like a real game, but I'm sure there's some slop both ways. The coaches are we got to get that cleaned up, but we got a couple more weeks before we play games that count.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that they were pressing, which, you got to practice to do that, but there being a lot of turnovers off of a preseason press, that makes sense to me. I'm fine with it.
Some of it was token, where it's kind of you had a guy making them walking up the court, and when you're Georgia, you have a guy, Catchings, who's 6'9", who can take it up the court with the point guard, just to kind of display the disadvantage that there is inherently in these type of matchups, that totally just flies. Georgia State would not have had Clash picking up 90 feet, but that's where Georgia has the power conference advantage. There were just really weird, very early on, just a pass goes out of bounds and actually hits a poor woman just directly in the face courtside. Just a miscommunication, no one coming back to help on these when there's these full court defense going up. Just stuff that they got to work on, but maybe not an alarm bell situation yet, because this is a Georgia team that was able to come into this game with that kind of knowing that they could hurt Georgia State in that way. Might not be the case every team you play. And so I'm curious kind of what this game does for the front court, just kind of going up against this type of a test. Feels like could only be positives as far as getting them acclimated right away, that you still got, in the first month of the season, you're going to play at Arizona State, at Cincy. It's not like you're going to avoid these type of games, but that probably is the top 1 or 2 defenses and just kind of forceful bigs you're going to face all season. And so you got it for free on the house to kind of just go into that type of game and figure it out and learn stuff.
No, that makes sense. I'm still excited to see how this team kind of comes together. That's been the one thing that we've been missing is just how Georgia State has started seasons, and if they can kind of tap into that development earlier in the year than later in the year. So, it's good to play these games where you're facing kind of tougher competition, and it's also good to do it outside of the confines of the season because just getting your head knocked in by a Duke or whatever has just not really been working for Georgia State the last couple of years.
Yeah, and like on paper, I think Cincy is slightly better if you look at like Ken Palm, Torvik versus Georgia, but they're about the same level. And none of the teams that they have scheduled are the juggernaut of SECs that they all lined up to play. It sets up where you can't really ease in because you're on the road a bunch, but it's definitely a more favorable non-con as we've kind of rattled through. Few things I want to keep mentioning just as we keep putting a cap on this. I'll probably end up saying more than I end up needing to on this because we have football to still talk about, but I don't know. I was back in the environment. Like, it was exciting to be at a live basketball game, and it wasn't a full lower level, but it was pretty packed, and really the Convocation Center, you don't need, like, if it gets ever to the point where they're filling that thing out 7,000, it's going to be cacophonous. Like, because that place gets loud, even with the just lower bowl pretty full, the student section and the band excited. Like, Mike White commented, "It's like I don't know how many were there, but you felt it. Like the atmosphere was important, and I think for their sake, they wanted a game where they got tested. They wanted to go into a rough environment. So, like, Georgia State did their job as far as like they don't need to worry about Georgia. They got their own things to figure out. But like, as you want to keep having these type of things happen, Georgia's going to remember that this was exactly what they were hoping for, and maybe we see it happen again. Maybe Mike White spreads the word if someone's looking for an exhibition." Test themselves in the area. Maybe that's how we get Georgia Tech back in the building, whatever it might be. But I definitely want to shout out that it's been easy to forget because the last 3 years have not gone well. But the potential for this to just be a very fun arena to watch basketball in, even before hitting like the peaks of filling it out entirely, it's there. And we saw that tonight. If you were there, you'd say the same things, I'm sure. It was just a fun place to be. It was fun to watch basketball again. Ja'Kai Newton looks like a lot of fun. He probably had until the end of the game when it was making threes, trying to make it a one-score game. The loudest moment in like the first 25 minutes was Georgia had a fast break dunk opportunity. He goes up and blocks it. Everyone goes crazy. He was +3 in the first half. And you will note that Georgia State was down 17 as a team. And he played nearly 11 minutes, so it wasn't just the case of, like, he came in and hit a three-pointer and then, like, that was all he did, so he was +3 because literally he made a three and left the court. Like, he was out there more than half the time. He was a positive while the rest of the team was -17. He only plays 15 minutes. They're certainly easing him in. He didn't play in the open practice last Saturday that I went to. Being careful with him as he was dealing with something, but it was something Jonas mentioned of like, I was proud of myself for showing the restraint to keep him to that minutes restriction that we had talked about. A lot to be excited about there as far as I think he can be the tone setter defensively. And the more he's able to get up to speed and play more than 15 minutes will be to the benefit of this team going forward. Chris Jones, true freshman, I think it was like 20 seconds into the game when he entered in the second half, he gets a steal. Ends up with 2 steals in 8 minutes played. I don't really expect a ton as far as like production from the 2 freshmen, but he is a ball of energy. It looks like if Jonas needs someone to count on in the second half or like just need a jolt, maybe like Ryan Green-esque, bring him off the bench. Doesn't seem like, he might not be fully up to the college game yet, just speed-wise and just everything he needs to know to develop as a player, but I think he can give this team something in year one just for little spurts. And Micah Tucker, I mentioned, took the 3, down 3 in the final 10 seconds to try and win the game. Jonas said after the game, like, they were fine with that look. They thought it's a look that he's hit in practice. He was talking about the number of threes that he's put up and made during practice. I don't know exactly what his role or his minutes are going to be because you got Malachi Brown kind of as the point guard 1. But they wanted him out there in that moment. Another reason this exhibition was good is you got him out there in a close game, possessing the ball in the final 20 seconds. I got to make a play. And The shot didn't fall this time, but I'm sure it was a great benefit to him to already hit the ground running. And I will say this for Micah Tucker is he tries. You see him tangibly putting out the effort on the court. And that's something you can't coach. So the rest of the stuff you hope comes along, but the first part of is this guy going to be able to compete at the college level is he wants it. And that was tangible from the practice last Saturday, now seeing it in this game against Georgia.
When was the last time Georgia State had like a freshman that you felt this good about going into the season? You know, we've seen some freshmen kind of pop as the season has gone on, but you know, that's a new development, I feel like. Or at least it's been a development that hasn't been there in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, even Mike White talked about it. Like, both these teams are trying different lineups and rotations during the stuff, and like it is an exhibition, so you can play around. And if they're in a one-possession game in 3 weeks against like Eastern Michigan or whoever, is Micah in the game in crunch time? I don't know. It might have been the thing that it's like you've got house money, you're playing around. You're seeing how he meets that moment without it counting in the win-loss record. It might be that it ends up being, you know, the core five, whoever that ends up being. You're not counting on Tucker. You're just giving the ball to Malachi and letting him figure out, or giving it to Jelani. But I think that the issue we've seen with Jonas is it's been the young guys have either been like starting out like you're going to play them in a certain role, like Ed Namoko even started just because of his size, and then you didn't really see it grow from that as the year went on. And I feel like just from what I saw in this exhibition, which is so easy to overread from one game, but there's something there with each of them that there could be a role for them on this team that isn't, they're not counting on to be like a DeMarcus Simons where they're contributing in a huge way right away, but they can do something. And I think as we saw this team get constructed, and yes, you're hoping Malachi and Jelani can be the guys you really rely on, it isn't built like around star power. It's built around the depth and the different roles that these guys can play. I think that we might have even said that basically word for word on this pod at some point as we're looking at all these guys they're bringing in. We saw a bit of that tonight, where you had two guys with 17, but at halftime, nobody had more than 5 points. Played a lot of guys, played more guys than Georgia did in this game. And I think we could see most of those guys play during the game. Not to mention, Anthony Eno didn't play at all. And it's a guy that I think we might expect to see play when he's good to go as a pretty key part of this team. So, you know, you don't want to overread anything from an exhibition like this. And like I say, both teams are trying things, but it wasn't like they lost by 40 and like everything went poorly. Like there's stuff that both teams can take away that are positives and stuff to work on. And I just think it's for the benefit of everyone, fans included, that this was a game that you could go attend, that the players could play in front of a real crowd and get that type of feedback as well as just whatever they need to work on basketball wise.
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds good to me. I hope that they can take this and get. When's the next game? I think it's on the 3rd, right?
Well, so they've got the exhibition at Morehouse next Friday. So it'll go in reverse next time, where they're going to be the ones in the road environment against a team that, you know, they quote unquote should beat, but it'll get tested. And so probably feel better about that given this result, that you can go on the road, play well, and get a win there. But as Georgia found out, you go into another person's house, you know, all bets are off at a certain point if the crowd gets into it. And so Georgia State's going to have to be ready, but it's a test that they need. It's a test Jonas Hayes wanted. And on the basis of just this one game we've seen so far, you know, it's hard to gauge this team because if you look at like your advanced metrics, you know, Ken Pom, Georgia State started out in the 300s. It's the lowest they've ever been picked in the preseason since we've been following the team. And you couldn't say that's unfair, just based on, you know, the results have not been good, and there's so much unknown about this team. And it might be that this team ends up being like that level of bad. They were certainly in that ballpark by the end of the last couple of seasons, certain stretches. But there's a lot that is just unprojectable about this team. And as we got the first glimpse of what answers might be, there might be hope there that it's like there's not a lot of expectation. There's guys that are going to have to learn to play together, gel, fit their roles, but certainly on the basis of you're going up against the 44 team in the KenPom rankings and you lose by 4, that doesn't sound to me like a team that's going to be that bad. And so we're going to have to see how they build from this and move forward. All right, now the main event, because it's the next live event that's happening. We've delayed it enough. Georgia State, now 1-5. They lose to App State, 41-20. We covered that in post-game show. I'm not going to point with my finger because I've gotten it wrong when I've done the editing, but there will be a link to the post-game show if you missed it, that I will not embarrass myself again by not knowing how directions work. I think I moved myself around where I was situated, so I'm going to blame technology a bit, but also I'll be better and just be smarter. Not a lot more. I guess the stuff that lingers from that game is also going to feed into the Georgia Southern game. So in the interest of speeding this thing up and not lingering, I'll go ahead and hit the bio stuff on the Georgia Southern game and preview that. This is this Saturday, 12th edition.
Hate Week.
Hate Week, the Georgia Grown Bowl. Georgia State still holds a narrow 6-5 edge all time against the Georgia Southern Eagles, but Southern has won each of the past two, and so they've got it within one. They're playing at home. They would tie the series all time with the third straight win here. It is in Paulson Stadium. It is at 7 p.m. Saturday night. Game will be on ESPN+. I'll actually be missing my first State Southern ever. I'm not going to be making the trip this year. But,
it's a tough trip. I get it.
Factors, but beyond any actual reason why it may or may not be happening, I'm interested to watch on the TV copy for the first time this year. Like, there is certainly a lot to be gained from going in person, but when I move past just the basis of just not being able to make that trip happen, I won't mind being able to just kind of see what everyone else has been seeing if they haven't been watching the games in person, just kind of see the broadcast view, and certainly stuff to learn about this team this week. I mean, this is the worst. Like, the vibes have never been lower in this series, and each team has coached this game with an interim coach before, at least once. So the vibes have been bad for at least one team in this matchup, at least a couple of times. Everyone's down here. Georgia Southern's 2-4 on the season. They're 0-2 in the Sun Belt, like Georgia State is. And they were picked second in the East preseason, so Clay Helton is, I don't know, hot seat versus not seat, because there's a big buyout, and certainly if you go across Georgia Southern Twitter the last couple of weeks, people have been digging into the contract, and vibes are not good because they kind of feel like they might be a little bit trapped just because of how much money it would cost for him to leave. But he has now got a 22-23 record in his fourth season. That overall record slipping under 500 again after their 38-35 loss to Southern Miss at home last Thursday on national TV. So, someone has been bad in this game before. Obviously, both head coaches are still in the position. That has not always been the case in this series, but it's kind of both these coaches need this one, but just as much as these coaches and these teams need this game, neither can lose this one. And someone's going to. And so this is going to make for an anxiety-ridden aftermath for one of these fan bases. Georgia State enters this one. I don't know where the line exactly sits right now, but last I checked, they were 6.5-point dogs on the road. About to be expected, but yeah, opportunities because it just neither of these teams seem particularly good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to come out and say it. Like, this is absolutely an anxiety bowl. I know that there's buyout stuff. I know, there are people who correctly would say that if Coach McGee loses this game, his job is still fine. I don't think Georgia State is the type of school where they're, an immediate trigger like that. But like I
think it's like 1.6 right now, just for the record.
Yeah.
I think the USA Today's numbers, because obviously I checked this stuff like this pretty recently. If those numbers are still accurate, it would be 1.6 right now.
Yeah.
Which...
This is as must-win as it can probably get for his tenure here at Georgia State. And I think the one thing that I will say about this game that gives me hope, if I can have hope for the 2025 Georgia State football team. I think in the preseason, I thought that this game would worry me a lot more. If you told me back in August that Georgia State was only going to be 6.5-point dogs, even in my best case scenario for what I thought that the Georgia State Panthers would be, I probably
would have had the records flipped. It would have been like,
yeah, fair.
Or you would say, Georgia Southern's maybe 5-1, they're 4-2, whatever. It's like You would have thought it was inverse. It'd be like, oh, Georgia State's hanging with, they're playing for the East because the expectation was this Georgia Southern team was going to be one of the, like, if you weren't picking James Madison to win the division, you were picking Georgia Southern in the preseason.
Exactly.
Very trendy, dark horse, like, this could be the year they win the Sun Belt. A lot of expectation. And that's where there's a lot of expectation in that job anyway, but hitting to year 4, not competing at that level, there was a lot of, this has to be the year for Clay. And it hasn't happened yet, and the opposite's happened, and they're giving up 38 points a game, which Georgia State's in the same ballpark, giving about 41.2, something like that. So a couple of defenses that have really not found their way start of the season. And I think the offense for them, certainly if you're grading the units, Georgia Southern's offense has been the best of the 4 units so far. They're averaging about 27 points a game, so I think it's probably been a worse offense than they were hoping for. But better than the defense, better than Georgia State's offense, certainly, and better than Georgia State's defense. And so I have been still bullish on, like, this Georgia State defense is not as bad as their numbers look. And I felt great about that take when they looked as good as they did against James Madison. Took a little bit of a back step against App, but I would also say, say what you will about the PFF grading system, not everyone loves it. That was the second best grade of a defensive performance for Georgia State this year per PFF. And so even as they gave up 41, it wasn't nearly as bad. And in fact was pretty good, grading on the curve of not a disaster versus like it was against your Ole Misses, your Vanderbilts.
Genuinely, and like this is how Georgia State has to win this game. They just have to start playing complementary football. Now I know that that's such a coach cliche type thing, but the reason you and I can watch the games and kind of say that hey, PFF is not as bad as people are currently saying it is. If you watch the defense in the first half against App, you take that performance. You absolutely take that performance. But when you ask your defense to be on the field that often, and when you ask them to do so much, it's going to get leaky in the second half. You need to find a way to have your offense be in games. If Georgia State is going to win this game against Georgia Southern's defense is not good either. They're going to have to find a way to put the ball in the end zone. Just repeatedly, it's not something that we've seen them do at a consistent level when a game has been in the balance.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, first off, we should say, absolute star show at wide receiver in this game. The top 2, well, I think Devin Voisin for South Alabama played on Tuesday, so he might have moved up in the rankings, but at the start of this week, the top 2 receiving Sunbelt receivers in Ted Hurst, Georgia State, and Camden Brown, Auburn transfer for Georgia Southern. Both north of 500 receiving yards so far this season. Certainly, like, the first guy you're circling multiple times in red ink, just like, you got to watch this guy. So, in a normal year with either of these teams just having, like, a so-so year, like, middle of the pack in the Sun Belt, not trending towards the worst teams in the Sun Belt East Division, it'd be a legitimate showcase if we're talking about it. Like, these receivers, great. And so that's where it's going to start for both of them. The way I look at this game is there's a couple of things each side of the ball, each of these teams want to do, and they're going to look at this as the game where they can make it happen finally. Both will look at this as a chance to run the ball better than they have. To the lower Sunbelt rushing offenses, Georgia State obviously the worst in the league. South of, I think, now 90 yards on average per game after the last one. But Georgia Southern also not doing great in that regard either. They're 12th in the league, 126.7 rushing yards a game, also under 4 yards a carry. They're going to look at this just based on Georgia State's given up 200 yards rushing in most of the games they've played as the opportunity to finally have success on the ground, and that probably would help out their quarterback, J.C. French, and that would also make it easier for the star receiver, Camden Brown, that if Georgia State's having to worry about the run, going to be opportunities there if they start having to account for the run a little bit more. But then you flip it over. Georgia Southern is the worst rush defense in the Sun Belt right now. 249.5 yards a game given up and 5.96 yards a carry, 19 rushing touchdowns given up. And yes, they played USC. That game, just like the Georgia State's first games against Ole Miss and Vanderbilt, that game is still doing horrible things to their averages. Because USC is a very good offense, and they just rolled them in that game, put up just ungodly numbers on the ground. But there have been opportunities for the other FBS teams on the schedule as well that they played. And so the thing you could point to with the 1-5 start and how things have been going so wrong for the Georgia State offense, and they have been, and we'll get to the quarterback of it all because that storyline is never leaving us forever and ever. You can say this is a copium thing. Georgia State hasn't played a bad defense other than Murray State so far. All of the FBS teams they have played at least have had a good defense. And then you look at James Madison is a great defense, I would say. I think Vanderbilt's got a above average to great defense. Ole Miss has the most talent that they will have seen so far this year, and they're going to probably grade out to be one of the better SEC defenses as well. So this is your first opportunity, I think, other than your FCS game, to play a defense that you will have chances against. And that Southern Miss just put 38 up against, and there were some deep throws there in that game that Southern Miss missed the throw on, or it would have been a touchdown. But the thing of it is, Southern Miss was making their run game such a factor, and Braylon Braxton, the quarterback, was a factor they had to worry about. Jeffrey Pittman ran angry that whole game in Statesboro for the Golden Eagles. That was part of why you started to see the pass plays start to happen, is that it started sucking the defense down towards line of scrimmage and you hit them over the top. Georgia State hasn't shown an ability to do that part. And I think if they're able to get some run established and Georgia Southern has to worry about the ground game, that's where you might see the opportunities start to stack up for a guy like Ted Hurst or like Javon Robinson. But we haven't seen that so far this year. So that was kind of the first thing I looked at this matchup, is kind of like both of them want to do it. And I think whoever does get it right or gets it more right on the ground is going to win this football game.
Yeah, and one thing that you could say about Georgia Southern's defense where you kind of throw away the USC game is that wasn't the only game where their teams haven't been all that balanced against their defense when it comes to rushing the ball. I would say that Southern Miss was probably the most balanced outside of Maine, which, that was one of the games that Georgia Southern won. They won big that game, 45-17, but everybody else, it's either they allowed a ton of rushing yards and not a lot of passing yards because that was just what they were giving up. Or in USC's case, they allowed a ton of rushing yards and a lot of passing yards in that game. That's an opportunity for Georgia State. We've seen this Georgia State rushing attack be terrible. To put it bluntly, it just has not been what I don't think either you or I expected coming into this year.
Just a smidgen over 100 rushing yards in the past 3 games combined.
Yeah.
Not going to get it done.
No. And it's like, again, to what I said on the post game, like you need to have an offense that is great and a defense that allows nothing to make how bad Georgia State is running the ball work. It just does not work, And that's definitely an opportunity because I we'll get to the quarterbacks, like you said, but I think Georgia State will pass the ball well here. I know that it has not led to a lot of success, but I do think there is something to be said about the quality of the defenses that Georgia State has been playing. And, at some point, if you're not average, they're not averaging 300 yards a game through the air. But at some point, if you were getting that type of production with all the chances that the offense has been getting, at some point you're gonna have to start converting that into points, right? And I know that there's special teams issues. They can't kick field goals, short, long, whatever. They've been stuffed on 3rd and 4th down a little bit. But again, those are against defenses that you would say, okay, like these are defenses that are gonna probably give Georgia State trouble. I'm not saying that Georgia State is just going to automatically win this game against Georgia Southern. That's not what I'm going to say. But I will say that this is not a Georgia Southern defense that is as good as any of the defenses that Georgia State has played so far this year. It's a defense that is certainly struggling. And if people are looking at Georgia State on their schedule and saying, oh, that's a defense that we can move the ball against, then Georgia Southern is also a defense that, the ball can be moved against.
Yeah, at least you're even in that regard this week. Other note there, cornerback Chance Gamble was a Kennesaw State transfers, played the last couple years for them, is going to, I think, electing for surgery. They announced it earlier this week. He put it out on social media, I believe. So he is going to miss the rest of the year, and he's one of their better defensive backs. And so a defense that's been struggling is losing one of their key cogs, probably the guy that would have been lined up on Ted Hurst more often than not in this game. So that's another thing you point to is like you don't like to see injuries in the game. And Georgia State's got a handful of ones they're still dealing with on the defensive side of the ball for sure. But it is what it is. It happens, and that is something that Georgia Southern's now going to have to account for on the fly, missing one of their key players. And it could be to Georgia State's benefit that they're figuring that out, and he's not able to factor in this game. The second thing, both of these teams are going to look at. They're two of the worst teams in the Sun Belt right now in pass rush. Georgia State has 7 sacks on the year. They've allowed 12 as a offensive line. Georgia Southern's only got 5 sacks. They've allowed 16 as an offensive line. But you look at those numbers, and each of them are going to say, whoever gets more sacks in this game is going to win this game. And if this is our week to get the pass rush going. And I don't really know. Obviously, you can't say much negative about the way that they handled James Madison. Georgia State's defense was ready for that one. They had a good game plan. They executed. They held them 14 points. They had a chance in that game. But since getting pretty, dusted, for lack of a better word, chunk plays galore for Ole Miss, it's felt like Travis Pearson's dialed back some of the exotic blitz looks a bit. And I kind of think this team needs to go down swinging, because I just think when you look at it, when they're not sending extra guys in the blitz, they're not getting home. They're not affecting the quarterback. And that even maybe goes double when you're down guys like Henry Bryant. Now, Ian Matthews didn't play last game. Like, you might need to just do that. And if it gives you disadvantageous matchups at the back end, you get Camden Brown gets a 70-yarder because you blitz and gets picked up and you give up a touchdown. I kind of think that's how this team's going to have to live and die, just because I don't think that you can keep doing it the way you've been doing it. And they didn't really breathe on J.J. Cole last week. They got one sack, but he was pretty comfortable.
And the thing is, it was working against James Madison. I know you said that it had tapered off, but part of why they were able to keep James Madison to only 14 points was because Barnett did not know where the defense was coming from. It seemed like he could not figure out who was coming, and so he was consistently making the wrong play. And when he finally started making the right play, that was the 2 touchdown drives that ended up winning James Madison the game.
And the right play ended up being a lot of time their hand off the ball, because that was working for JMU. It wasn't even just the passing game guy going, because we talked about 74 passing yards given up in that game. So I think that's where it starts, of kind of that needs to be your bread and butter. And look, to make a pro connection, the Falcons blitzed Josh Allen, I think, on 56% of his dropbacks in this past game on Monday Night Football that they won. And that's an easy way to get yourself killed by an NFL quarterback, especially a guy that people have been talking about as front runner for the MVP this year. But the thing is, it worked, and he was off kilter all night. I think he got pressured more than he'd done. I think it was 44% of his dropbacks or something. He was pressured. It worked for them. And obviously, NFL defense, they invested a lot in the pass rush. It's just not a comparable scenario. But the point is, it might not be by the book, but it might be what this defense has to do. I think this Falcons defense kind of needs to go blitz heavy for right now to generate the pass rush, and it's working. And I think Georgia State kind of has to go the same way. And look, as a fan, that might be infuriating if they do it that way and they give up some big chunk plays, because if you don't get home on this quarterback, J.C. French has got receivers you can get out to. But it's kind of, I think, how you're going to have to try and manage this game as a defense, because you cannot go through this game and the game before it and not force turnovers and not get sacks like you need to get off the field. Weirdly, they've been great on third down, so they've just really struggled on first and second down. The last 2 weeks, third down defense has been outstanding, and it has made their numbers look, they're more middle of the pack when it was really a problem the first couple of weeks of the season. But they're struggling to get those impact plays on the early downs, letting offenses stay on the field and even just march on the first and second down. So even if they're getting stops on third down, they're not getting enough of those. They're literally not seeing third down enough. And I think that's kind of the way they're going to have to play it, is how I see it. And I get that that's risky, and sometimes coaches can be risk averse, but I just kind of think you look at this team, it just isn't set up where you don't have that alpha pass rusher that you can lean on to just get all the stats. Mike Green and Marshall last year was kind of able to impact that defense by himself and make those type of plays himself, and he got drafted very high in the NFL draft because of it by the Baltimore Ravens. I just don't think you really have that this year. And that's not a problem. You can work around it, but I think you need to get back to, I think, what Travis Pearson wants to be philosophically anyway. So it just feels like maybe getting back to what you're comfortable with.
And I mean,
and what is going to help you win games.
The thing, too, is it's not like we're saying they have to engage 8 on every single play. I mean, it's a simple math equation. Georgia Southern or any offense can only have 5 people who can catch a pass, handle a run or whatever. And there's 11 defenders on the field. You can always have everybody matched up in man and bring just one extra person. And yes, obviously I am way oversimplifying defense in the sport of American football, but I just mean that there are different ways for Georgia State to be creative. Because, I'm going to be honest with you, even last week, I don't think Georgia State is getting beat over the top. In this game specifically, this is an opportunity for the secondary to be kind of what you and I think that they are. And that's not to say that they weren't getting beat, because yes, they were getting beat. But I think the area where Georgia State is struggling right now is in the front 7. And it's a lot of where App State specifically was killing them was in
the middle of the field.
Exactly.
Which is, you will note, not where the cornerbacks are, except for the nickel sometimes. But
yep.
I think the corners are good. I think the corners are probably the most reliable part of this team. Deuce Fillmore, Bernard Kazi, Shams John, those guys, it is passing the eye test that they are playing well and also grading out well, and you'll get PFF or whatever. I think that's a reliable group. And I think that, of going into this matchup knowing that they've got a really good receiver, that's the part of it that I'd be worried about least. Yes, Deuce Fillmore got beat on a touchdown in the corner of the end zone against App last week, but that'll happen. You're going to lose some battles as a DB. But, on a down-to-down basis, I think that they probably have been the most trustworthy unit on this team, and they've been able to make plays, except for the interceptions, which you got to start getting those. Dropped a couple the last couple of weeks,
they don't take risks.
Opportunity to show up in this one.
That's the problem. I think the last risk a Georgia State corner took was who did the pass broken up in the end zone against James Madison with his helmet off. I think
it was against Vandy.
Vandy, yes. Yeah, I think that was the last risk.
Concussion risk more than football play risk. But yeah, I think you're right there. Which there's nothing wrong with being fundamentally sound, not getting, like you say, they haven't really gotten beat since the Ole Miss game. There haven't been since the first play against Memphis where you got the big chunk play, there haven't been just wide the heck open receivers where you're just getting beat. And I think as a credit too, that room has been playing really well. Certainly JMU receivers were not getting separation against them 2 weeks ago. And so as you're going into this game, worried about the defense, worried about the offense, like I said, I think on paper right now, the Georgia Southern offense has been the best unit in this game coming in. You feel as good as you can about that part of it because I think they've been playing well. You just need to find a way to generate a pass rush because, look, J.C. French now heading halfway through his second season as the starter. He's about as experienced a quarterback as Georgia State's probably going to face this year just in the new world of the transfer portal. Everyone's usually cycling in a new starter at quarterback. He's going to, if you give him time, going to pick you apart. But he's thrown 6 picks already this year. And if you're throwing pressure in his face, Southern Miss baited a couple of picks out of him just by he started feeling those footsteps and he made some throws he shouldn't have made. You've got to take advantage of that part of his game. He's a good enough quarterback that if you let him get comfortable, he can beat you. Experienced now, and obviously, I think you could probably say looking back at last year, the game in Atlanta was, I think, the game that Georgia Southern fans started feeling more and more comfortable. Yes, this guy is our quarterback. Because Dexter Williams, who's now at Kennesaw, was there, and he ended up winning them the Marshall game because French struggled in that one, and it transferred anyway. But he was great in that game in Atlanta last year.
I remember
Georgia State could not get after. Other than there was that weird fumble, where he just kind of lost the ball, and there was the strip sack or the sack, whatever. Kevin Swint had to play against him as well. I think it was a sack. I forget if he fumbled or not, but other than that, he was pretty comfortable all day in that game and just kind of managing things. So Georgia State, this coaching staff has seen J.C. French as a guy who can beat you and put 38 points on you. But there's other stuff in the tape there that if you're able to put him in less advantageous situations for him as a quarterback, you got to make those plays happen on Saturday. You got to take some juice out of the building because as bad as things have been going for Georgia Southern, they've been on a roll in this series, and they would love nothing more than to feel happy for a week beating the in-state rival, leveling it at 6-6. But that feels like the third like kind of thing, like if this doesn't go well, it's another week where it's a missed opportunity. Georgia State and the turnover bug. This feels like a week where maybe you can make something happen there. And if you can't, probably going to lose the game.
Yeah, I remember you saying that exact same thing about French last year, and what happened in the game? Georgia State never made him look uncomfortable. He had so much time in the pocket, and he picked them apart. And you can't do that again this year. You're going to have to find a way, get him off his spot, get him to make mistakes, because this is a guy who does make mistakes. This is not, the cleanest of quarterbacks, and it's not like we're talking about a guy who does not give the other team the ball. You can turn over Georgia Southern. You just have to actually get the football.
So that's all done and dusted. I guess we've left the one thing unspoken about.
We went so long without talking about it.
If you were hoping to get... I don't know. Honestly, I can't get a read for if people wanted to get it out, get it over with, or if they're delay the inevitable type with this quarterback talk. But it still lingers on. Honestly, I couldn't gauge. On the Sunbelt call on Monday, I asked just kind of what's the plan for quarterback? And he talked about it being competition this week. But Cam Brown showed you enough last game, and TJ Finley's worst outing. And I think we all thought that even if he believed there was a value to this two quarterback thing, that at a certain point, especially things still haven't turned around, that you'd make a decision there. On Tuesday, I gave him kind of the out, the in-person presser of kind of so you said yesterday it's competition, it's fully open. Is it really fully open, or you just don't want to tell us? Which, that's his prerogative. If his answer was, I know, but I'm not going to tell you, I would have been fine with that. I would have been okay, fair enough, you're not going to give me the answer there, but at least it would have given an insight to, they know what's going on, they've got an idea. Maybe that's the case. Maybe he's still continuing to lay it on thick, and he is still not declared publicly, but even Tuesday, as he told me that, they had an idea. They've got to pick, man. They've got to. This can't keep going on. If we're going to another week where they're doing the 2-2 series thing and heading into this environment in this moment, needing to jumpstart the season, and you're just not deciding on a quarterback, you're still doing this thing where you're trying to make both of them work. I still don't know what to say. It would just continue to be the microcosm of just kind of why this tenure hasn't worked, of just kind of indecision and keeping everyone happy. And when you look at what he said about it, I just don't think everything lines up, and it just doesn't. At a certain point, I got it, but we're past the point in the season where it makes any sense to keep it going. And if you want to use an example from this league, not a comparable team because Marshall won the Sun Belt last year, but they're about, I think, 3-3, so year start. Then they rattled off a bunch of wins, but to this point in the season, they were still playing both Braylon Braxton and Stone Earl last season. But middle of the year, and Georgia State fans will remember because Braxton took the job in that game and basically never gave it back. Huff made a call and stuck with it. And they won 9 games and won the Sun Belt title, and he got the Southern Miss job. And like I say, can't really rely on that exact scenario happening again here. But you can understand feeling it out. You got two guys you like. And I think if one of them wasn't here, if it's just TJ Finley or if it's just Cameron Brown here, we aren't having a conversation about quarterback and just kind of all right, how can we make this guy and the offense work better? But you got to make a tough call here. You got to tell someone they're not playing this week, and you got to make a decision here because the offense demands just a single vision moving forward.
The frustrating thing is it's just not working. I could understand this if you were seeing any semblance of results. Literally any semblance of results. And I could understand it. But they can't run the ball. Okay. They can't get points on the board when it matters most. And here's what Georgia State's offense has done if we break it down by the season. In the first 2 games, I know Finley didn't play in the first game, but in the first 2 games, they scored 23 points combined. Against Murray State, they scored 37 points. Against Vanderbilt, they scored 21 points. In their last 2 games, they've scored 21 points. So their best offensive output is against the probably bad FCS team. And then it's been a whole bunch of, we might be able to put the ball in the end zone 3 times over a 2-game stretch. Maybe the Vandy one, they did it in that game, but the offense looks the same too. The thing that's frustrating is the offense looks the same regardless of what quarterback is in, and that's not good given that both of the quarterbacks have completely different strengths. If the reason is to play Finley because of the arm talent, then why is it that the arm talent isn't shining often enough? If the reason to play Brown is because of his ability to be mobile and, that kind of opens up the passing game and opens up the running game a little bit because teams kind of have to honor that, why are we still in a situation where the running game is the worst that it's been and he's not doing design runs and the passing game doesn't really look like it's being run off of anything that has to do with running? Like you said, it feels like they're so in between in their decision making, in their offensive play calling, and it's frustrating to watch because, to the point about the defense again, I'm not saying that the defense hasn't made mistakes. I'm not saying that the defense, is a perfect unit. This isn't 2024 Ohio State or anything like that, but like, the defense can be a good unit. You have to get them off the field. You have to keep your offense on the field for longer than a 6 and out or whatever those, all those drives last week where they ran like 6 plays and gained like 5 yards or whatever. If it's not the penalties with the Georgia State not being able to line up correctly or, false starting all the time, it's just that the offense doesn't have an identity. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I cannot sit here. I can tell you what I think the offensive identity should be. I can tell you where I think there are talented players on the team and what those roles should be. But in terms of this is what Georgia State is going to do and this is what Georgia State wants to do, I can't tell you what their offensive identity is because they don't have enough. Their offensive identity right now is false starting and getting 3 and outs. That's not an offense. So it's frustrating because
that's cardio.
Exactly. Yes, really, it is cardio. It's frustrating because you would love to sit here and say, okay, here's what they're gonna do against Georgia Southern. Here's how they're gonna attack this. But like, we can guess for the 6th week in a row. You know,
Ted Hurst and Javon Robinson have combined for 50% of the targets, so no matter what, I can guess if the passing game is going to revolve around those two. And that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Getting those guys the ball is in space, finding creative ways to get them the ball, has been the best part of this offense. They're lining up Ted all over the place, whoever's been a quarterback. Javon the same way. They're starting to use him. I mentioned it. They're going to have to start using him as an actual halfback if they're going to line him up in the backfield, and they gave him the ball last week for a handoff. So they're starting to see that they know that that's going to start showing up on film if he never does that. And so now they've shown that, and teams have to account for it. And that could be a way. 2013, I think it was, so even before David's time, Albert Wilson ended up being their best running back some games. And he housed a 75-yarder against Arkansas State, lining up in the backfield and just doing his best running back. I guess really doing his best kick return thing because that was he was elite in that. But you can use him there. Ultimately, I think right now, 6 games in, the thing you need to do as your identity is part of what they've been doing, which is kind of like give your best players the ball and let them cook. But you need something beyond that, and you need just to, like we say, it's going to be easier on the whole offense if they can just hone in on the quarterback and making the offense tailor around those guys' abilities. And this is where I get into kind of like fact versus myth on this, where, again, I think if it was just TJ Finley, it would just be about, all right, let's go full air raid with this thing. Like, let's max protect. Let's make sure that even if it's 2 or 3 guys out in the route tree, like, let's keep them protected and just make this thing work and figure it out. We've seen Georgia State teams make bowl games with that type of passing attack. It's worked. But the effectiveness hasn't been there when you look behind, look under the hood where, and these are from PFF, but these aren't grades. These are just literally like where the throws were. So I don't think you can really quibble with this. This is just subjective numbers, but on throws of 10 plus this year, TJ Finley, 11 of 39, 272 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. So some home run capabilities there, but not very efficient. 10 plus yard throws for Cam Brown. He's 20 of 36, 391 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. If you take it a step further and just talk about the throws that are 20 plus yards, TJ is 4 of 15, 131, 1 touchdown, and the 1 interception from earlier. Cam's 5 of 11, 186, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Like, on the basis of you're talking about who's got the arm talent, and this is the thing that Dell mentioned this week about what TJ brings. And certainly I think he has that, for sure. got the better arm talent of the two. But when you're looking at how it's actually manifesting on the field, Cam is outplaying him in that regard. And so even removing the mobility part of it, like based on the numbers, Cam's been better. And you can say that Cam benefited from playing an App State defense that was trying hard, let's say less, once they got up by 31 points. And that's true. But Cam's numbers also count the Ole Miss game where they were terrified of throwing past the line of scrimmage in the second half and just kind of packed it in. Whereas against Vanderbilt in the second half, TJ was still throwing it a lot. So it's kind of a wash as far as like the quote-unquote garbage time of it all where the numbers got a little bit better. And this is the other part, and this was a directly thing that Dell said, where he's talking about the two strengths of the players. Like, I just asked, like, compare them, what you like about them. Things got to kind of be perfect up front. Your protection's got to be on point regarding TJ Finley. We provide him time to throw the ball, then he can be very successful. Just on the basis of, like, that hasn't happened, removing TJ's ability from it at all, you just don't have a team that is built around keeping I mentioned it earlier, 12 sacks already, and I think that the problem's been getting worse as the games have gone on. You just can't build your offense around that. Like, you've got to make the decision, and you've got to make the decision, I think, as we are very candidly saying, putting Cam Brown out there more, just because the offense and what it does well and what it doesn't do well, even without a quarterback, even without the ball, the person throwing it, it just is more suited in a flawed offense to have Cameron Brown be the one who's making those plays, getting them get the offense built around him. And I really I've seen, even from when TJ got eligibility granted, the college football world, a lot of people dumping their jokes out, I thought a lot of that was unseemly. It's still going on. I think it's still uncalled for. Kid wants to do well, and he has played well the last couple of seasons, especially Texas State. The numbers bear it out. And it's his sixth school, whatever, but he's not. People have been like he's a 30-year-old, whatever. He's got his bachelor's degree. He got it from Auburn. He's been going to grad school the last couple of years. Getting grad school on the house when all said and done seems pretty good. And I think he's only 23 still, even now. I think he just turned 23 recently. So it's like a lot of that stuff has been unfair. And so I don't want this to turn into a pile-on TJ because I don't think that's warranted. I think if he was the quarterback, you would do the best you can. Just kind of recognizing that this offense isn't necessarily built for that, but just objectively when you look at it, and this is a long way of saying what we've been saying all along, but just you got to make the call here. You got to give your offense the best chance to win this game.
The problem isn't even like what the offensive line is capable of doing or not. If it's TJ and Brown is still there, there's nothing to pile on. I think TJ if you gave him 80 offensive snaps, there's no timeshare, he's throwing it, what did they throw last week?
61 times.
Yeah, it's okay. Maybe don't throw 61 times. But, if you just gave him a normal amount of plays in a normal progression, I don't think we're having this conversation, even if it is going poorly. I think he could probably... The frustrating thing is I think the reason he's not having success is because he's not in there to get the... sometimes you just need to see the ball go through the hoop, right? 4 of 15 is not good when it comes to the one skill you're basically attributing to Finley. So his confidence has got to be shot. I mean, the last few weeks he has been overthrowing Hurst a lot. It's not like he's, making some plays and then overthrowing.
Both QBs have had very clear miscommunications with receivers, which might happen if you're not getting all of the reps in practice with the ones.
Exactly. If you make a decision either way, I do think that the play of that quarterback is going to improve. So the question, as it has always been, is which one is going to get your offense the way that you want it to be and it needs to be. And I really don't think that the answer matters. It just needs to be answered.
Yeah, I mean, short of like guy's helmet comes off or like injury, whatever happens in this game, I just think you need to see whoever takes it on snap one is the guy who's finishing the game. And it's starting to feel like less of a bug and more of a feature of this coaching tenure of just kind of like, we didn't really do series to series, game to game last year, but it was always very like hush-hush about who's going to start the year, and then Christian won the job, and Zach gets it when Christian gets benched in the middle of the year, but it still never really totally went away, where it was never like, yes, this is the starter, we're sticking with it. And then obviously Christian finishes the year when Gibson gets hurt. it smacks of an inability to just like make the decision as the person saying this is what we are going to do. And for a team that's 4-14 through 18 games through 1.5 years, it just feels like part and parcel of what's been going wrong. It's kind of emblematic of everything that has not worked in this 1.5 seasons. And so this is the time to get it. And to bring it all full circle to talk about the Georgia Southern game as a whole, 7 p.m. Saturday, ESPN Plus. Both of the fan bases want to see a win because it's a rival, but they want to see their teams play hard and want it more. Like, this is going to be a macho thing, but it's like whichever team doesn't come out there clearly trying to win the game more is going to pay a real penalty with their fans, because for Georgia Southern fans, it's like this is not going to be the guy to take us back to the heights where we've had before. And for Georgia State fans, it's kind of like a year and a half in, does this team still believe in the message that Del McGee is preaching? And so for different reasons, but kind of the same reason, like the mentality is going to matter more. And I think that starts from the top down in this case with the Georgia State Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that they can get this one done, because some annoying conversations are going to have to happen if it looks the way that it has the last couple of weeks. So,
not to mention, as we left out this game on the pick'em because we forgot that it was going to be a Tuesday game, because of course the Sun Belt always throws some loops. If Georgia State loses this one, South Alabama lost on Tuesday at home to Arkansas State to leave themselves 1-6. So, could very well be that next Thursday's primetime game on ESPN2 between South Alabama and Georgia State will be a loser is bowl ineligible bowl, which I'm sure ESPN was hoping for stakes when they put that game on the docket way back when they picked those games back in like April time. I'm not sure those were the stakes that they had in mind, but at least if that happened, there would be something that would be played for in that game between the Jaguars and the Panthers. But obviously, if we can delay those conversations, the better. And look, big picture, this is as close as Georgia Southern's been to knotting the series up since they initially took the first one. You win this one, you get back to 7-5. You play the next one in Atlanta. That feels like your window to, instead of it being tied again, maybe you can push the lead back up to 8-5 next year. You're up 3 again in the series. Like, this will be the turning point in the vibes in this series. It's going to be the turning point for these two teams in this season. So certainly a lot on deck for this game on Saturday, and just I think everyone just wanting to see just the level of care, the level of attention that's maybe been lacking, or evidently has been lacking with this Georgia State team through the first part of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered it all, and I'm glad we saved the quarterbacks for last, because I still feel like that was less than what we wanted to say about the defenses. So,
the MVP is the basketball game for
sure.
One, it made this podcast a whole lot longer. We haven't even done the pick'em yet, but it was a nice little palate cleanser.
Yes.
Even imagine saying that about Georgia State basketball the last couple of seasons, but Georgia State basketball was a palate cleanser for this football team.
I mean, whatever it takes, right? So we can move on to pick 'em really fast before we get you guys out of here. If Brady would like to help our YouTube audience throw up that last week for me, unless you want, yeah, okay, I'll filibuster. It's fine. So in looking at last week, I had to make
my picks.
Yeah, exactly. In talking about last week, I had a good week. Brady did not have a good week. I
took some shots. Honestly,
you did, yeah.
I wanted ULM to win that game.
Yeah.
I wanted ULM to win that game more than I thought they maybe were going to. But it's like, they're favorites. Like, This has got to be the moment, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And you can see now.
Troy decided to break both of our hearts. And
I didn't pick it, but I told you, like, I was like, I got a feeling like Texas State could give this one away. Troy, like, I wish I honestly had the guts to call it, but Troy massively exceeding year two expectations under Gerard Parker.
Yeah.
And Texas State just can't close games.
No,
like, the issue is they're a front-running team who scores a lot and likes to get ahead, and they cannot finish games. They cannot get stops down the stretch, manage those moments well. I think doinked a field goal or hooked a field goal. They would have won them the game in regulation, but wasn't to be. They lose in overtime. Troy's 2-0. Texas
I
State's 0-2 in Sun Belt West. Troy's certainly more of a player than we were expecting in that side of the ball, or that side of the division. Southern Miss, I feel right about. Like, I got that one pegged right, that they were going to be good year one under Huff, and they're well on their way. So now, whenever that game, the Scott Watkins Bowl, Southern Miss Troy, might be for all the bacon.
Honestly, it could be. Only other result we haven't said. I was surprised Old Dominion lost. They looked not great last week. Not Troy. Marshall definitely put the belt on them a little bit in a way that I wasn't expecting.
Turnover stuff going on, but again, as we've just gone a whole litany of like why things aren't going well under Del McGee. You look across the league, and Troy's turning it around to year 2 under Parker. Marshall gets a huge marquee win against the team we thought was the best in the league, in Old Dominion, by 24 at home under Tony Gibson in year 1. It starts to be harder to be like, this thing can't happen right away. Dow Loggins has App State 4-2, looking good for a bowl return after missing it last year.
Yep.
Having to fire their coach. Southern Miss, year 1 under Huff. They might be the Sun Belt West champs.
Yep.
And Georgia State's 1-5, 4-14. Like, it is harder to, when you look across the league, make the pitch of like, you've got to have some patience here, when other fan bases don't need patience apparently.
Yep. We've talked about it in years past with other coaches. It has seemed that Georgia State is like the only school that has been unable to get a coach that just has the like, okay, yeah, I'm bringing this team in and we're just a 10-win team now, And I know that that's unfair. I know that that's, asking a lot, but it's clear that other Sunbelt schools have been able to find coaches that have been able to do that. And I know that it's not a resource thing. I know that there are other factors, yes, but Georgia State is capable of doing what some of these other coaches are, what has happened to some of these other schools. But none of that matters for our pick'em this week. Looks like it's going to be another. Yeah, this is probably about what I expected. Troy heads over
this week. Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Troy heads over to Monroe. I feel like we're done selling our Troy stock. Like, we're just gonna buy. That just makes the most sense. Coastal is still bad and is headed to Boone. And App State has some confidence right now. I think. I still think that they're probably not as good as people probably think. But
yeah, I curious when they play ODU, JMU, which you did miss one there. Game of the week, honestly.
Did I?
Old Dominion, James Madison might be for the East Championship.
Is it this week? I thought that was next week.
It's this Saturday.
Okay, yeah, we can just add that real quick because my answer doesn't change. I'm still picking the Dukes for that one.
So nice dissension there near the end, but yeah.
Full disclosure, I'm only picking them because they're at home. Like, if this was if this was at ODU, I would have picked them. But that's going to be a good game. Let's see, Texas State Marshall. I mean, it can't happen twice in a row for both of these teams in that way, right? Right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just feels like law of averages. Texas State, even if they are like up 17 and blow another lead, like they'll hold on to this one, right?
Yeah.
Southern Miss Louisiana has found it again. They look like they might be just like dead in the water. Desert Mo's found something. Lunch Winfield, the excellently named Lunch Winfield at quarterback. They've leaned into their run game, and it's worked. And they played JMU close, just like Georgia State did, except they did it in Harrisonburg. So props to them for that. But I think Southern Miss is the best team in the West right now. And so I think they take care of business here.
I just wish Lunch was like 280 or something like that. Like, you got to be a big boy to have a name like Lunch, and he is a very svelte quarterback. So
hey, we all got to eat, man.
We all got to eat is correct. State Southern. Call it cope, call it hope, call it whatever you want to call it. I think Georgia State gets it done. I know we just spent an hour plus on the pod talking about quarterbacks and defense. I just think Georgia Southern's defense is just really not in a good place. And I think that Georgia State has enough defense in the secondary, especially, which is what Georgia Southern likes to do. I think they can steal this one on the road. end the losing streak in this stretch. I don't think it's going to be easy. I know I made the joke to you earlier this week that this is going to be either a 7-3 game or what did I say, like 41-35 game? Definitely going to be that of the two. But I think
I would take the over no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
Points will be scored in this one. I sell the odds of that 7-3 happening.
For sure. But I do think that Georgia State will take this one this week.
For me, just call it believe it when I see it type. Like, you're going on the road in this spot. Vibes are low. This is the type of game that Georgia Southern's fed off of that. The vibes are low for them, but they can sometimes kind of get down the trenches, get in the bunker mentality and figure it out. And I just got to see it first, I've been riding with them. I picked them in some of these spots earlier this year where the odds were further against them than they were in this one. And I just got to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally fair. And then, to your Sun Belt game of the week. This makes a lot of sense. I was missing some teams here. I was like, this is a lot late for all these buys, but anyways, neither here nor there.
We did miss Arkansas State, South Alabama. I probably would have got that wrong. I probably would have just picked the home team in that one.
Yes, I think
and
I also got that wrong. It was horrible. It did not
a great game of football. Very Tuesday night vibes, which is to say it was a 15-14 game.
Yeah. And 12 of Arkansas State's 15 points came in the fourth quarter. Both teams did not score in any quarter. It was just, terrible game. But this one probably won't be terrible. James Madison probably wins. I feel like I like them in this game kind of the same way that you said that you liked Southern. ODU has not consistently won this game. Like, yes, they've surprised a couple of times in years past and just kind of randomly won a game that they shouldn't have. And, last year's game, I remember it came down to a very, very close fourth down, like not deep in James Madison territory, but, deep enough. Whereas a field goal would have tied it. But I think that James Madison is going to win this one again. It'll probably be a good game because these two teams play very good close games. I think the last few years they've just been decided by 6 points over the two games. So, it should be fun. Should be a good one.
I'm sticking to my guns here because I just have thought Old Dominion's the best team in the East this year, best team in the Sun Belt, honestly. And this is going to be like a reason that is centered. Like, I'm getting to that because I believe they're the better team, but I feel like losing by 24 in Marshall is the best thing that could have happened heading into this game versus winning by 24 on the road in Marshall and keeping it rolling. Like, things have been going so well for them that a bump in the road to kind of recenter things if you win this game and you get the tiebreaker over James Madison doesn't cost you in the long run, might be not the worst thing to have happened to them. And I just think, with Colton Joseph, the quarterback battle here, I just like Joseph more. And I just think they're a pretty complete team. Not a lot to dislike on either side of the ball. Some unluckiness, some turnover stuff that happened in this Marshall game that let it get out of hand, and probably won't be the case here. And the new blood angle of it all. It's like, it'd be fun if there was another team. Obviously, James Madison hasn't won the Sun Belt yet, so this would be more angst for them in that regard. But just getting someone else up there at the top of the league might be fun in a year where certainly it's getting away from Georgia State, and they won't be that new blood. But ODU, you wish for the best here, I guess, is kind of the angle I take.
I get that.
Hoping for a good game no matter what. This is going to be, I think it's on U, which ESPNU's probably the worst spot to get because the viewer numbers are pretty bad on that one versus getting on one or two or whatever you're hoping for. But beggars can't be choosers in the Sun Belt, and hopefully people tune in this one because I think it's going to be a really good football game.
Yeah, that 2:30. Yeah, that should be doable for both of us since you're not going to Paulson, so should be good.
Yeah, a nice side effect of the plan is I will get a nice, good dose of college football Saturday even before I then lock in and watch this State Southern game.
Yeah, it's a good week for that as well. I'm blanking on who I'm thinking of, but I know. LSU.
Ole Miss Georgia.
Yeah, Ole Miss Georgia as well. And the Is Michigan for Real Bowl as they host Washington.
Or is Washington?
Also true. So yeah, it should be a good week. They're always good weeks, It's college football. Never a dull moment in this sport. We'll see who gets fired correctly and incorrectly next week. That's not a word. Incorrectly. What is with me making up words this season? This is ridiculous.
I'm the time zone later than you too. I should be the one. I mean, I've been stumbling a little bit, but that should be my job right now.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground. Hope you've enjoyed the listen. Basketball to talk about, football to talk about. Funnily enough, I usually schedule these to go out exactly at midnight on Thursday. If I started right now, I don't think I could actually get it to go live until after midnight on Thursday. It's been a late one here in the A. But this will get out as soon as it gets out, probably sometime early tomorrow morning after I have time to ruminate on things, sleep, and get this edited. But thanks for listening again. Gonna keep endeavoring to give you the best coverage for Georgia State, even in a one-win season, even with the expectations being what they are in the basketball side of things. Still don't feel like there's any reason to shy away from talking about this team. There's still anticipation and all, and so hope we've covered everything you're looking for as far as that goes. Like and subscribe. Thank you as always. We'll catch you for the post-game show, which might end up being just a regular pod because the team plays on Thursday next week, so a lot to get into on the next one as well. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Thursday Night Podcast.